The first piece I'm going to read is called On Writing Jokes. This is from a book of essays that will come out next year from Mulch Press. I think it'll be in their Haystack book series. And it'll be titled The Man in the Dark Blue Suit. A good joke is as good as the teller or writer, and everybody knows it. There are, as there always are, exceptions. And some honest folks admit they can't tell jokes, but which maybe is why they might be able to write them, and maybe not. Jokes sure are tough to write. I began trying when I was about 10 and haven't succeeded yet. My problem is the punchline and the bridge. Jokes are the most contained form of literature, aside from the poem and the prose vignette. The poem, in an academic sense, sneers down at the joke because of the joke's helpless rigidity, adherence to the punchline. But the vignette, which, curiously, is the closest form to the poem that there is, has, in this way of talking, the respect of kin for the joke. The vignette is an open-ended form of joke without a punchline. The pot won't call the kettle black. If the definition is wrong, there is a refreshing inherent sense of openness about the vignette, like the incident and nothing else. Like the poem, the vignette is the celebration of its own form. Okay, yeah, but when I use, say, the story form, it has been given me that I must know as much about the form as I do about anything, including content, and in the most literal sense. My newest knowledge is I know what a story is not, but not what it is. But I'll find out someday, and when I do, I'll let you know. It's got to do with somebody, anybody, talking, saying anything. A good story is anybody saying anything interesting. Anyhow, how to write jokes. Initially, picture the guy telling the joke, a fat guy with bad breath, etc. The joke's in its own context and can work on its own, like a poem does. A good joke, great in the telling, appears a sure thing in the writing, but not so, because the skinny guy in the pinstripe suit, his attention gets paid to the teller, not to the joke. The joke, even shaggy dog type, or one of those mirthful, filthy things, is a one-line shot to a punchline with a bridge behind it. Punchlines do that. They leave their bridges behind them. Poems don't, nor do stories. Vignettes don't have bridges. A brilliant joke stands on its own because brilliant jokes can be as miniature novels with the good punchline merely punctuating the end. Jokes that fail in the punchline, which is why often their bridges are memorable, and often the names of the people involved are as amusing as the whole joke. So again, the proper noun is so important. But no matter, wonderful or hopeless, the form of the joke is rigid. It's the way you bring it around in context that is the point. There are exceptions. Jokes are told in living rooms, on trains, in cars, bars, and beside the barn on the farm, whichever place is most convenient for the writer to handle, to find the most stimulating chance for expansion. That's partly what's funny. The place, the man or woman telling the joke, and possibly, if we want to be really arty, especially at that point, the circumstance. In my humble comic opinion, a good or great joke ought to be told with intelligence, gusto, and a bright eye and pure belief. Yeah, there are exceptions, like the cool dude. But when written, it's a different matter altogether, because a joke can't go on its own or on the personality of the speaker. It must be written into its context as a joke within another story and merely enhance the storyline of the whole. Melville told a funny, shady joke in The Confidence Man, and most recently Ed McBain, even Hunter, in his crime novel Let's Hear It for the Deaf Man. McBain has a talent for writing jokes. He's done it before, and he keeps them absolutely in context. He does. He's very good. As Melville did. The kind of joke someone tells can be very revealing of the teller and, as with Melville, an act of written perception. In working on a novel a few years ago, I got so desperate I figured I'd begin the joke with the punchline. It wasn't a great joke. You know those jokes about the guy and the dog in the bar, or about the guy Or about the guy who comes in and has a drink, takes the miniature piano out of his shirt pocket, a tiny stool which he assembles, and then a canary out of his jacket pocket. He puts the canary on the stool, and the canary begins to play and sing, etc., and the guy won't sell the act, but somehow I was doing it wrong, and even though I began it with the punchline and then ended it with it, the bird was tone deaf, but the joke didn't work because of two then evasive reasons. I didn't picture the guy who told it to me. It was George Cook, who was a very, very funny man who could mumble all afternoon and appear to be talking seriously. And the inherent suspense in every joke, they don't fail, they collapse, was exclusive to George's joke, therefore George, which I missed. Jokes work in an existential counterpoint to the questions and doubts of the afternoon, and when written must be handled as carefully as a lawyer's brief. In other words, it must be contained in context as assuredly as George who told it. The suspense of the speaker in the narrative must match the joke and vice versa. If the person and the joke are given a locale and identity picture, that double action suspense will have an unwinding action all its own. Look up joke in Skeets, jocose, etc. See jocular, then see juggle. Chaucer quoted extensively. Laughter is close to grief. One is occasionally puzzled whether or not someone is laughing or crying. The expressions are often the same. We even weep with laughter. And twice in recent years I laughed so hard I blacked out. And this April in Michigan, I saw a laughing 12-year-old girl lose her breath, turn purple in the face, and then vomit. While her mother wiped the table, the girl finally inhaled, got her color back, and turned to me and weeping, broke into laughter. So did we all. Humor is one of the most complicated things there are, and the key structures, simplistic and rigid, of suspense to a punchline with a bridge behind, must be written naturally, carefully, and consciously. There aren't many who can tell a good joke well, and there are far fewer who can write one. It's a rigid, stubborn, and chances are a dirty little form that defies the best of us. And it could be that in our lives we don't experience the wild experience of joke-telling in the way we would like to write it, as the jokes we hear are told by corny businessmen, innocent smartasses, or bored bartenders. But the best jokes are told by jokers, and the writer who writes them has that to know the juggler's suspense, to do it, exactly as Bob Creeley with his poem Juggler's Thought, which Melville knew.